Welcome back. It's been a while. I decided I would not do an episode on episode number 360 on a recap of everything because I'm not through preparing. I've kind of tried to prepare, but ultimately I've been kind of slacking at that. But lately I've been looking at some things that got me deciding I should really make an episode. So here we go. This one's gonna be focused on large igneous provinces. What really got me looking at them again, I did an episode called Reading Lips, Large Igneous Provinces, is Ontong Java Plateau. So there's a theory, Ontong Java Nui hypothesis, that Hikurangi, Manihiki, and Ontong Java Plateau used to be all one thing, one system. Which is interesting because Silesia and Yakutat are oceanic plateaus considered to have been from the same oceanic plateau. So it's known to have occurred over here. One's like up there, one's over here. So anyway, before I talk about that, let's kind of just go through this thread I wrote on Twitter, just posting information as I found it on all of these large igneous provinces. Large igneous provinces are considered to relate to extinction events, Siberian traps, Deccan traps. Others, Wrangellia is linked to what's called the Carnian pluvial episode. Carnian pluvial episode. It's considered, so if we go Wrangellia, probably linked to the eruptions of extensive flood basalts as the Wrangellia terrain was accreted onto northwestern end of the North American plate. So that, and this is a period of intense rain. Just apparently, it started to rain a lot at this time, which is interesting. Right after the Permian Triassic boundary, when Siberian traps were erupting. According to radiometric dating, it's like 20 million years, but if we recognize that the radiometric dating method is only useful for relative ages without squishing the time frame together by accounting for more variables that are not accounted for, like that the earth expanded and radioactive decay was highly increased during that time. Then 20 million is not that much difference. So I found that interesting. But I just kept looking around, like Tarim Basin, which is a subject I focus on because it is part of like a shallogram structure here. Apparently there is a Tarim igneous province, large igneous province that formed at 320 million years, or 280, sorry, Tian Shan. Adjacent was 320, and then over here, Emission is actually like over in this region where like seemingly materials flowed out this way. So there's Emission at 260 just before there. So I started looking around. I started by looking specifically into Ontong Java Plateau. This has been like 2 days now. 2.5 days since I posted about this, and I was realizing, oh crap, I'm kind of forgetting what I was looking at because I've already moved on. But I was thinking I should make this episode. I'm gonna call it full circle because we're at 360. But I think like, we're gonna go over the entire Earth, so I think it's kind of apt still. Okay, so maybe click this paper, placement characters as timescales, and volcanic gas release rates of continental flood basalt eruptions on Earth. So I'm not sure why I linked this one. Possibly it mentions the Ontong Java Nui hypothesis. And I watched this video testing the Ontong Java Nui hypothesis. So we're going to get into some of that. So I said, I suspect they occurred after the Central Atlantic Magmatic Province from the same undercurrent. So as we go through here, if you haven't seen my Earth's undercurrents video, you really need to be at least acquainted with that. But G plates, if we go and look at the magnetic anomaly map, I don't know why it's bugged out down there. Basically, a big part of my interpretation is that the mantle was physically punctured in Pakistan and current flowed out in all directions, but it flowed especially along a channel this way under Europe to the boundary of Europe, and then directly under North America when they were connected, because all the continents were connected as one single landmass before the Earth expanded. And then it flowed over here, but then it started to flow, like fill up the pressure under the continent and formed like a channel along the boundary that went down this way, where then it ran into resistance over here and went through this way. At which point it went across here, which was also here. Florida was like right here, so it went across this way. The Yucatan Peninsula and Honduras were separated along this. And it flowed out in a V shape that ultimately came from here, though, and flowed out, I believe, underneath. So like all this crossed over here was physically underneath here and sticking out even underneath what was then Australia was here, Papua New Guinea was here, Philippines were up here, Sulawesi here, North Maluku, which real quick we can just look at some animations. They were like this, these ones with the bonds that broke physically still imprinted in the ocean floor right there. Connections across. The Juan de Fuca undercurrent having like a relationship to Philippines in terms of it has its own like understructure. Maybe I got a different one. Like this one maybe. Notice also there's this going up through there, like an arc this way. I'm not sure if that relates directly to this, maybe as it moves away, like relating to this. Okay. So, let's keep going. Also, the Caribbean Colombian large igneous province, which is over here, seems to be closely related to the secondary mantle puncture hole location, which the first one was in Pakistan, and then the second one was in Ecuador here. Right here. At the edge of South America over here. And I was thinking the Caribbean Colombian large igneous province is related to like current flows that were going that way, which formed at 90 million years. But so the Central Atlantic Magmatic Anomaly, or Central Atlantic Magmatic Province, magnetic anomaly, was from this current flowing, though, this way, that then continued over here, which is then at the edge of Australia and Papua New Guinea. So that's why I was like, so let's bring up this image. So I believe, so if we go back to this one, kind of compare it, particularly Papua New Guinea. So it's pretty well placed. I mean, it's not perfect. The Earth is a smaller radius at the time that these things are happening, so it's not gonna be perfect. But it's very telling, in my opinion, because it essentially, like, it's still connected. It still shows the general relationships. And then, interestingly, Fiji right here, right next to Fiji right there, is, I think, more so initially over here. But then, interestingly, this aligns quite well with South America. And also, like, points to a smaller radius globe by the angle going on here. Other things that I noticed in this, it's got this, like, top shape over here, like a point here, goes into over here, and then goes this way. Maybe it doesn't quite go back in over that way, but it is reminiscent of the shape over here. That's kind of like a top, spinning top. One over here, maybe even to here. I don't know. Although, interestingly, over to like more here is like where this region did not exist. The South America and North America were closer together initially. So maybe relating more like a top hat when they were actually connected than now. But besides the point, at the center here is Ontong Java Plateau, and I'm like, I didn't mean to. Like, it's not like I was like focused on Ontong Java Plateau. I was just like trying to combine Australia and the Americas in a way that I thought was like worth looking at physically, just looking at it. And I noticed, oh, here's Ontong Java Plateau. And mind you, there's this undercurrent going this way that goes over here and over here, and it looks like it like there's a gulf here, a region of like a basin, and then opposite to the basin is a mound, pretty equal in size. I'm not saying that it's like composed of the material from here necessarily, but perhaps energetically coupled to it in some way. And that was kind of like the furthest I got when I made this. I was like, that's interesting. But then I started looking at large igneous provinces again. So let me just continue through reading this and then go from there. While Ontong Java Plateau is closely related to the undercurrent that traveled along eastern North America, then below Mexico. I'm just saying what I was just saying, really. So basically, this current, like, caused continents to separate, and then caused deposition of a mound between the continents that became Ontong Java Plateau. That sort of like participated in the pushing apart of the continents, but then it became attached to the Australian et al. Region and moved over here over here. It's like right here. So it's hard to see in the magnetic anomaly map, but here's Papua New Guinea, and then here's the Solomon Islands, like bird head shape. So if we go over here, on the like nose of the bird head off of Papua New Guinea is Ontong Java Plateau. So it's basically right around here in this region where this current's going across. Mind you, interestingly, in the past I've mentioned this over here looks out of place. Like this with these lines going up this way looks like it was more like these regions right here where there's this current flow that went this way and went over here in like a trident and participated in all of these little nodes along the way. And over here, it kind of looks like it was over here and got shoved over. So I found that kind of interesting. Like, it looks like this region was physically pushed over and then filled in around it by current flows to like coalesce into the ocean floor. But in the process, it displaced it by this mound. So that's kind of interesting. But then over here is the other one that's apparently considered to be related to Ontong Java, and then down here, like in this region, I believe it is the Hikarangi. Okay. I then go on to say that likely, which I look for, but I couldn't find anything. Although it seemed like I'd have to look at like the chemical composition of this one, the chemical composition of this one, and compare them actually, and not like find a paper that did it. That's what I was looking for, was any scholarly papers, peer-reviewed process where people already did it, of comparing them and saying there's some kind of similarity between the Ontong Java and the Central Atlantic Magmatic Province, although there is definitely, one is on the continents. The Central Atlantic Magmatic Province is on the continents, where Ontong Java is not. So any flows that like basically were flowing in these flow patterns, particularly here, and went up onto the continent, would have probably mixed to a degree with its surroundings, so it probably wouldn't be identical in makeup, although there may be segments of it that are more pristine and not mixed, that survived the process without mixing, that maybe are more like the Ontong Java. But point is, I couldn't find anyone actually looking into comparing them. So that's what I was saying there. And then the Kalkarinji Large Igneous Province, which is not on this one. Several of them are not on this one. Maybe I can find it here. Kalkarinji, Australian craton, 510 million years, which downloads is probably, let's see, this is the Ontong Java, testing the Ontong Java Nui hypothesis. So maybe I'll just go through this real quick. So she was, interestingly, she used the word sphere to describe this. If you know my research around Hawaii, you'll find why I found that interesting. But not that this was interesting as well. Not a single mod. Actually, I talk about this in my post, so let's just pass these. Also, there's rotation, which I talk about. There's Chalcodyrrhynchi over here. This is from the age of the Phanerozoic large igneous provinces. It's a YouTube video. Notice large igneous provinces, and then mass extinctions in the red dots, which I guess are the big five. Claimed to be a comet impact as well at that point. Why should we care? This was interesting. These are all large igneous provinces. These are the names of them. So then I just kept looking and like thinking about it. Chalcodyrrhynchi. Here we go. This is kind of what I was looking for. If you saw any of my Australia videos, not any, but a specific one, like more recent, Back to the Outback maybe or something. It's probably, I'm pretty sure it's called Back to the Outback. I was looking at this region right here. Let's see where Chalcodyrrhynchi is. So it looks like it's actually down here. Relating to Odin's blind eye, where this is the nucleus in the magnetic anomaly map. Like the stand of the table, the leg of the table, which is the final chamber of this ammonite structure here, which has become the nucleus of Australia. But there was one over here as well that is no longer there, and it's still visible here, but it's not visible in the magnetic anomaly map, really. Kind of like this one as well. It's just not visible there. So Chalcodyrrhynchi seemingly has something possibly to do with that area, as well as up here, like generally up here, which is closely related to the ammonite structure. Like here's the nucleus, like the center, not the nucleus, this is kind of the nucleus, the center of where the structure spirals out from is up here. Here's this path upward, so if we can't even see that. Looks like it starts generally under that island there. A little bit here, and then more so over here, like where this blue is, up to like around here. So in this blue region, generally speaking, is a large igneous province, which is interesting. 510. So the dates are really gonna like point us in directions that I was thinking, which is really why I wanted to start talking about this and decided to. Okay, so then there is, which was very, very early on after the Earth's expansion process began, which was 541 million years. Radiometric dating is how I fairly certain it is, or maybe sooner than that. In terms, like, prior to that, not sooner, but like sooner in time, not sooner to now. Prior to that, maybe prior to 541, but definitely by 541, the expansion was beginning. The process of undercurrents was happening. Its structure shows a very close relationship exists between it and the ammonite, which is what I was just talking about. Like even the way it's shaped here. Shaped here with this like thing around it. And then ammonite, which maybe relates to there. In terms of like this segment. Hard to say without overlaying them. Brisbane. Yeah, it's about there. Based on that over there. It's probably about the end of the ammonite. So it's in the ammonites region, which is interesting. Then there is completely unrelated in terms of just another one. The High Arctic Large Igneous Province, which is dated to 300 or 130 million years and generally into the Cretaceous, so people will say to like 60 million, I believe, which is up here. Another one that's not random. So here's the ammonite, which has a 510 million year large igneous province. And then up here is the terminal, the northern terminal of the Earth in the magnetic anomaly map, which I talk about in many places, such as the Earth's undercurrents video, as well as all of these subjects I touch on in Earth's undercurrents video, which is another really exciting thing about this is it corroborates, even before I knew these details, it corroborates what I was already thinking. It just shows the path has validity. Okay, so anyway, the portions of it though here, Alpha Ridge and Mendeleev Ridge, are really where the north terminal is. Lomonosov Ridge is like over here, I believe. Like here's the, if we go to this map, the crack of the mid-ocean ridge, and then this wall. Crack is over here. Gackel Ridge, I guess. I don't know. But then next to it is there, and then next to that is the north terminal. So I'm like, wait. The north terminal of the Earth is a large igneous province? Is that what you guys are telling me? That we know formed around 130 million years? And it's also these other portions over here, which I guess were connected before this opened. Although this might have opened by then, but maybe not. So then I just circled it there, put the dates, Wikipedia image for that. And then there is the Afro-Arabian Large Igneous Province, dated to the Oligocene, 31 million years, which appears to be a precursor to the East African Rift Zone, 25 to 22 million years, at least from what... I'm not sure how many papers cite these dates. This might be just from a quick search in terms of the dates. And I feel like I've heard African Rift Zone forming in more like 18 million years, but it's generally close to when this was happening, directly adjacent. Here's the East African Rift Zone. Here, intense volcanism is where the Afro-Arabia Large Igneous Province was happening. I'm not sure if that's what it's referring to, but And then there's the North American igneous province, dated to 62 million years, which is over here next to Greenland and into like the British Isles and other places over here, which is considered to be part of the High Arctic Large Igneous Province. And then this paper here, maybe. Let me just read this. Believed to have been a hot spot that contributed in the formation of the Siberian Traps, the High Arctic Large Igneous Province, the North American Igneous Province, and Iceland. So all of these are considered to be possibly related. I think the paper is like highly like makes a point of saying it's speculative. Several authors have raised the intriguing idea that the earlier Siberian traps were the product of the same plume that later would produce the magmatism of the High Arctic Large Igneous Province, Alpha Ridge, so the whole area there, North Atlantic Igneous Province, and Iceland. Recent argon dating from Taimyr Peninsula to the north of the main Siberian traps reveal Triassic and Jurassic igneous activity, indicating that the locus of activity was moving in a relative sense northwards from the Siberian Craton and West Siberian Basin and out towards what is now the Kara Sea. It is not a great leap to speculate that the activity continued into the Cretaceous across areas of the Barents Shelf and the then contiguous Lomonosov, so then contiguous, interesting, Lomonosov Ridge. If this interpretation is correct, and it is important to stress at this point that it's highly speculative, they point out, then several implications spring to the fore. Firstly, that this would be the longest lived plume system on record, some 250 million years. Secondly, that the plume varies dramatically in its output, with pulses of magmatism at 250, 230, 200, 125, 90, and 60 million years. Thirdly, there are periods when the plume is virtually inactive, for example, between about 90 and 60 million years. This may be an artifact of sampling, but to our knowledge, no basaltic rocks from this time interval have been recovered from eastern Canada, western Greenland, or the Davis Strait, where they may be expected to occur. So I didn't even read the totality of that. I'm pretty sure I just copied it right here, though. I read this portion, and then I saw this was related, and just copied it and kept going. So, studies have suggested the modern-day Iceland hotspot correspond to the earlier North Atlantic mantle plume that could have created this is from Wikipedia, obviously. Through both geochemical observations and reconstructions of paleogeography, it is speculated the present-day Iceland hotspot originated as a mantle plume on the Alpha Ridge, the Arctic, migrated down. So this is not connecting it to the Siberian traps like the other one was. So let's real quick go back here. So what they're saying is whatever caused the Siberian traps, perhaps also it appears possibly created the High Arctic Large Igneous Province and the North Atlantic Igneous Province and Iceland. And then if we look over here, though, it's like, look around the whole totality of the Earth. There's really not. There's a 201 here, the Central Atlantic Magmatic Province. There's 210 up here in Alaska, so in the North Pole region. But then after that, anything around 250 and greater, but not like approaching 500, but more so around 300. There's 300 in Europe here, 280 in Tarim Basin, 320, 260. 260, 280. Like a lot of activity here too that I would say it looks like maybe it was generally erupting from here. and then migrating this way, like some kind of focal point of pressure that was initially causing eruptions from Central Asia here, and then moved up to the Siberian Traps, and then over to ultimately probably to this place too a bit, and then to the North Pole, where it created the terminal, and then back down to Iceland basically. Like there was a relationship, it seems, between them all. I wonder even. I haven't thought about it completely. But essentially, because that Kalkaraki, or Kalkarangi, the one in Australia that's not here, that was 510. And there's really not, if we go to this list is quite comprehensive. And start generally around, like, let's say, here, 535, which within the 541. And start looking around, we see this one. Let's see if we can find where that is. I think that's in South America. Pretty sure it's on this map here. But this one says Piranha Tendeca 132. So I'm not sure where that one is that it's listing. It's gotta be in Brazil. It's just gotta be. Okay. So there's one in Brazil, Wichita. I think this is in. Wait, actually. I think it is in North America, though. Yeah, this one probably in this region, the Wichita Mountains in Oklahoma. So there's a bit of an eruption here. There's the eruption in Australia, eruption here. And then Siberia, 440, we start seeing not just like the Siberian traps, but we start seeing many. Swardak, let's see, I didn't look at where this one is. Let's maybe just put it in here. So over here, I guess, in this region. See one there. And then Altay Sayan, so there's an actual map I posted. This one. Altay Sayan province is the green, which I guess is also over here. I assume this green over here is part of the Altay Sayan province. But so it's very much in the Siberian Traps region, but before it predates it. And then, which is interesting. I mean, it's kind of crazy to me to think about that. Like, the only one I ever hear anyone mention on the regular is the Siberian Traps, because it's associated with the Permian Triassic extinction, where this other one is not. So it's really not given mention, even though it's the same place and relevant to like the nuances of what's happening. So there's that one, and then there's also the Yakutsk Vilyui Large Igneous Province, which was the next one, I believe, right here. 375, 365. So we got 440, 420, 375, and then East European, so in the same general area, 375. Asia, 340 to 330. Let's see where maybe we can find that. Images. Maybe it's, I don't know. Doesn't seem like it's there. Maybe it's around Japan, like prior to it becoming an island. On this list here. Australia, so that's interesting. There's some more Australian ones. So we got Siberia and Australia simultaneously interacting or having things happen, more so than anywhere else in this time frame. And Central Asia as well. So then it's almost like it's vibrating between the two, where it goes to Australia, Siberia, or just generally Northern Europe and Eurasia, Australia, and then the same back to Central Asia at least. This one's interesting because it's literally at the Himalayas, the Panjal, way before the Himalayas, though, 289 million years according to radiometric dating. 280. And then South America, China, Siberia, and then some North America, but this was the one in Alaska region, and then Rangelia along the western coast over here, which is up here, and Rangelia, it was probably down here, like generally here. I was thinking of that oceanic plateau. Silesia is over here, and the Yakutat is over here, but there's some kind of igneous province, the Rangelia one, that was at 230. Okay, Central Atlantic, and then Tibet, South America, Antarctica, Tasmania. We'll get into that one. South Africa, Antarctica, wherever Caucasus is. Australia, and then we start to see Pacific Ocean. Although this says Paleo-Pacific, I don't know what to make of that. Have to look into that one more. San Bagawa, I think I tried to. Japan. I don't want to get too stuck on looking into things right yet. Okay. Magellan Rise, Pacific Ocean, Indonesia, which East Sulawesi. I found that really interesting. Sulawesi, you say? There's a large igneous province at 138 and 80 million years in Sulawesi. When I'm interpreting, if we go back to this animation that I didn't play yet, this one, Sulawesi, East Sulawesi is over here. This current flow, mantle current, from basically that path along the eastern coast of North America and down under Florida and under Mexico and across and out and creating the Ontong Java Plateau. It also went up this way into here and like etched out this region, but I guess also deposited a large igneous province, possibly at 138 being like the initial push, but then like it started to flow with the current, so it stopped depositing until 80 million years when it stopped flowing with the current and started to like run into resistance and get more in place where it is now. At which point another deposition was happening. I don't know if that's possible. Let me go to the magnetic anomaly map real quick. So that place is right here. So it's even got this huge mound. Like right starting there. So my thought is essentially the current went under this way and divided in a V, which literally is still visible right here doing it, because this is what was the path that it took. And maybe Sulawesi, this region, like physically got pushed up generally and then down generally. So like this current, and then it ran into enough resistance that it couldn't just flow away in the current, so then it began to deposit material there. So that one even like is interesting at a glance. Just the fact that it says Sulawesi, boom, so much that can be gleaned. Whether or not that's exactly what happened, it seems like way more advantageous that I've already looked at things like the Mid-Pacific Mountains I've looked at. That one we know formed underneath North America. Like this. Physically abutting here. There's the Mid-Pacific Mountains in the Pacific. So this is more how it was. Where the Western Pacific was physically began all the way over here underneath the crust of North America, I believe. I mean, almost certainly underneath. And then slid away, but not before the current flows going up this way, shoved in and created mounds along here that became the Mid-Pacific Mountains. So, like, another connection to the current flows I've been talking about in the Mid-Pacific Mountains being a large igneous province, effectively. I mean, maybe it's not a super large one, but it's considered one. Indian Ocean, and then the whole the high Arctic one that spans that time frame. Tibet as well. And then Australia, Pacific Australia, South Africa, off of South Africa. No way. This place. I guess that would be reasonable for it's just that they associate it with Hawaii. I'm like, I also associate this with Hawaii. And there's a large igneous province over here in this region. Dated to 100 million. Which is pretty good timing for like just before Hawaii, the Hawaiian Emperor Seamount chain started to form. before the Emperor seamount chain specifically. I think it starts at like 82 million. 85, let's say, from this, whatever. I mean, that's Wikipedia, but that's good enough. So in the 80s of millions of years, according to radiometric dating, this started to form. And then we get in closer. Indonesia. Similar time frame to Sulawesi. What was that? 120-100. Where is that Sulawesi one? $138.80. So this one is both before and after, where these were like intermediary. First to move, last to be in its final resting position, maybe, kind of thing. But Indonesia also experienced the current in the intermediary time. Hess rise, and so another Pacific Ocean. A bunch of stuff going on in the Indian Ocean region in this time frame. Building up until the KT boundary at 65 million, which is when Deccan traps occurred. Some Atlantic stuff as well, when the Atlantic fully was able to separate, because South America and North America, or in South America and Africa, were still like conjoined in this area until the late game in the process. Like they started to separate North America and Africa, and then South America and like down here from Africa, but like this portion was still generally holding together until around 65 million years. And then we approach present, and the most recent one is the Columbia River basalt, which I talk about in the Eye to Eye episode. Basically, stuff like this, where accretion of Western North America, literally this region, accreted onto Laurentia. This material closed an ocean current path that then pinched it to a point where it basically created a high velocity current through this region that then ran into resistance down here, this purple down in this region, from other currents going north from Mexico, basically. And it ran into the resistance there and bent around and went out to the newly forming ocean. But as it did so, it had so much outflow that it literally, this is my interpretation, is it literally etched down into the ground with such intensity that it cut into the magma below and caused like a counter, basically a vent, where the Columbian River basalt then emitted from that vent opposite though and pushed against it, and like a loud current from a lower layer of magma to then emit opposite to it, and then it reached like a balance point over in this region and formed the Pacific Northwest area, as well as the current kept going over here. It created Sage Wall, wherever that is. That's over here. But it kept going, created Sage Wall, interacted with the Rockies, probably ultimately shaping them in many ways, which I made another animation today, just generally trying to show these paths. Maybe we could play this twice. This path, showing a path, especially this left one, a path that bends, path, 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 and then cutting across there, and then down through there. Okay, so let's look at this real quick. I made that to try to convey the idea through a tweet. Kind of tricky. Like if we look over here, there's a general boundary there. And then I was thinking specifically maybe over here even, there's something going like this way, across that way, and then here, this path. So if we kind of follow it back here to just generally go more straight, here across, across, and then as we approach it right here, it starts to be more detectable. Across, across. Then it reaches what I interpret to be some kind of interaction with the pressures. Like the closest it gets to the Hudson Bay, it interacts more there. And then like Hudson Bay's, the pressures over here like overwhelm the current enough to like slightly deflect it, because it doesn't, like it may continue straight in part and go around like that. And I even think it does kind of do things of that nature as it goes on scales I didn't really notice yet, but, or like reason out, let's say. But it goes this way very like distinctly through this region, and then continues through here, especially. Like this is a vein, like a main vein through which current flows. That is, it's not like meandering like a river, like over here, like this path, even if you like widened it, it's gonna meander, like unless it's like really a jet stream and just cuts through resistance. So this cut through is the point. It really cut through here, cut through, cut through, cut through, and then it reached, I guess, a region where it kind of like exhausted somewhat that way, but then kept going this way as well. Like maybe it put out an arm this way and filled up pressure over here to a point where it like kept going this way though, and then kept going, but then resistance kind of starts to bend it, so it starts to run into a bit of a wobbliness as we approach this way, to a point where it kind of almost changes its energy level, like it's going at this energy level, but then it like moves over an energy level and continues over here instead. Like it would have continued out further, and maybe it did in part with like Bighorn, I don't know. But it looks like it went more so over to like this region, and then it continues to Flathead Reservation across here as well. And then it goes over here through this region, like through all these outlets, down into this region where then the Columbian River basalt erupts because it etches it. It then the earth like heals, like it's like cut. It's literally like a cut. And what happens when you get cut? Your blood comes out and heals. Like the earth, when the earth is cut open by this beam of current that's just etching the surface enough, it literally erupts the Columbian River basalts in response, which then flow out over here and fill this region with flood basalts, and then interact with the water and go over here to Yellowstone ultimately, with eruptions along the way. And then it continues this way, and continues over here, down this way, all the way down, and wraps around here to like a focal point of Chicxulub, as well as going out that way, going in this way, and then continuing generally across into South America even. Huge current. I mean, it certainly wasn't just the vein. There was probably also higher levels of water, at least past the glaciers. But the vein was highly relevant. It flowed all the way across like that. And I've mapped this in lots of ways. Lots of ways. Related it to lots of evidence. Okay, let's keep going. Here's Villa. This is another thing I mentioned. The Vilyuy Yakutsk is oddly, like, if you. The mid-ocean ridge up here that just stops, and then here's the Villa Nui eruption region. It's kind of like, I would say maybe related. It's unclear. I'd have to look into when this really happened, and if there's any chance that this, because this is like 370, it's probably too early to be like directly. Maybe it like did this over here as well, but it just couldn't break it apart, so the earth itself healed through this large igneous province, and then it started to like cut back further and further until it actually had a point that the earth couldn't directly heal, and the only thing it could do is expand, and in that way heal by just reaching a new energy level rather than staying at the same energy level and just like redoing the surface. Okay, so this also sits in a large rift basin. So maybe I can go back here. Rift. It's kind of sideways, so it's not in line per se with the oceanic rift. But it certainly seems related. Okay. Simultaneous to the North American igneous province at 62 million years as well was the Seychelles large igneous province, which is associated with Deccan traps. Deccan traps are distinctly related to undercurrents. Like my Earth's undercurrents video is very related to the Deccan traps. Very, very much related to the Deccan traps. Here's Seychelles, Deccan traps up there, Madagascar. Of high relevance is that the Ontong Java Plateau, if caused by a mantle plume, so here's an image. Let me just play this real quick. Oh, this wasn't even playing. I thought I had some music going. No uplift for the Ontong Java Plateau. Highly relevant because if what we're interpreting of mantle plumes, these things are not, I'm relating them along the surface of the earth, saying like currents flowing here, then over, like it's flowing in these ways and then inducing these structures as current flows out of these mantle puncture holes that I point to and flowing along these paths based on the magnetic anomaly map. Like I'm saying, there's a current that flows out this way and generally out in all directions. And then from these flows, Ontong Java is produced. So it really is below the crust, but like the continental crust, but above the mantle itself in like the lithosphere kind of region where it induces these structures. So it wouldn't really be expected, from what I'm saying, to have an upwell. So the fact that it doesn't, is, to me, is pretty confirming, honestly, that it's not what we interpret. But we basically say there's some kind of upflow from below at anywhere there's an anomaly, there's just a flow from below. And like individually explaining them all with this flow here from below, just there's an upwell. We don't know why it's just happening. There's just an upwell. There's an upwell over there. There's an upwell over there. And then with enough of them, we have all the oceanic plateaus. And with enough more, we have the continental large igneous provinces. But they're all like disconnected, basically, although some of them are like conjoined by some things, but like generally speaking, it's allowable in the interpretation that we have of these things for them to be just disconjoined and not related to one another. Where what I'm saying is really like they are all related and can all be related to this process of undercurrents that was flowing from the mantle puncture hole in Pakistan under the crust of the continents before they broke apart, before the earth expanded, that then induced the earth's expansion process, inclusive of, in the process, forming these large igneous provinces, which then, like, can actually explain how they got there. Which is a good thing, I would say. Okay. Rather than just being like, oh, there must have been, like, there was a hot spot, there's some upwelling from the lower mantle, like, deep enough that we just don't, it just came up. Because we're thinking in plate tectonics. Of further note, the isotopic composition of the Ontong Java plateau basalts are not similar to mid-ocean ridge basalts, also from this video, which I just linked there. I didn't know what to make of it exactly, I just thought it was probably important enough to mention it. And then, very curiously, the Ontong Java Nui complex is additionally proposed to have rotated to account for paleomagnetic data. So, Ontong Java Nui complex, they didn't just like move apart. They've apparently, based on paleomagnetic data, they rotated as they moved apart. Which, if we look around this area, like, I don't know if you notice, there's pretty big vortex here. Like, physically a vortex. Almost like two colliding energies in appearance, wrapping around one another. And then over here, Here's Fiji, is what I've termed this like angel with this smaller terminal looking thing here, kind of like the North Terminal, but a much smaller one in appearance, that then has like a flame structure over here with like legs, so that's kind of like a snow angel with like a trident coming out of the top of it. This would make sense that there's rotation because there's literally in my Earth's undercurrents, I talk about this more in depth. I mean, I rapidly jump through it, but at least I touch on the details more in like an animated and visual way. So, I mean, I could see rotation happening, especially because the Earth is expanding, so like things are gonna have to change their positioning relative to one another in ways besides just like directly moving opposite from one another. And then that one. So just to go on. In addition, I've established a relationship between the Columbia River basalt and the Missoula flood, such as discussed in my Eye to Eye video, which I linked there. It is like the Earth was fractured in weak points induced by pressures of the expansion process, both from magmatic undercurrents below and flood currents above, which is like end flood currents, so probably more than just this one. But like cut down by the flood currents and pressure pushed up to like assist the process too. Maybe even cracked it and so on, and then healed by large igneous province at times that at times press segments of crust apart enough to contribute in breaking their bonds. So like these broken bonds here, these are literally like breaking of bonds between the atoms of the continents, fractally so. There were several large igneous provinces that formed around 300 million years in Central Asia, namely Tarim, Emeshan, Panjal, traps in the region of the modern Himalayas, Sian Shan 325, as well as Siberian and Yakutsk Vilyui traps, as if pressure were building in this region then. So like something's going on in this region at that time. Also, Skagerrak centered large igneous province around 200 million, which I believe is this SG. I can't even remember it anymore. It might be all of it. But this is Greenland? Yeah, this is at the mouth of the Snake of Norway and Finland and Sweden. Like the Snakehead. Snakehead at the mouth. In that region. Large igneous provinces around 300 million. So let's go to here real quick. It's basically at this region. That's interesting. I didn't really notice. This path goes like all the way up to the Snakehead, with a little space there where it seems like that large igneous province formed. There was a current that went in this way, formed the Kursk magnetic anomaly here, wrapped in, and maybe it then like also wrapped out an exhaust path that went up this way and like ran into this current over here to a point where it erupted over here. I'm not sure when the Kursk magnetic anomaly is considered to have formed, if we have any mechanism to date it even. How old is the Kursk magnetic anomaly? I don't know if we can even tell. Okay, that's where that previous image was from there. Long-term stability in deep mantle structure. Evidence from the 300 million Skagerrak-centered large igneous province. Oh, damn. I still haven't, like, brought it all together. um, so really it seems like flows built around Australia, generally opposite to the mantle puncture hole. Maybe not like antipodal, but in some opposite way too, where they built around Australia around 500 million years, which then, like, this is my kind of my thoughts is imagine a flow comes out and it, like, builds mass where it's at. So then instead of, like, because initially the undercurrent is not occupying the space below the cross, so it has room to flow. So initially at like 540 million years, flow just starts to flow out from Pakistan, underneath Pakistan, in all directions without erupting through the crust. But then at around 500 million years radiometric dating, this flow builds up enough pressure that it actually begins to erupt through and interact with the surface enough where we are like, there's a large igneous province there and in Australia. But then, like, all these pressures are flowing towards Australia, which I talk about in my Earth's undercurrents video. They're all flowing towards Australia, so then that almost like creates a peak for the currents. It's like a pressure zone where then it like overwhelms back, so like the balance starts to change, so then it like goes back to Asia some reason, like there's so much pressure over here and like back pressure that eruptions start to happen in this region and over here, I guess. Which, I mean, if it's related to the magnetic anomaly, Kursk magnetic anomaly, like that's related to an undercurrent flowing this way that bends at this corner, physically bent up that way, bends this way as well, which then filled in pressure over here and then erupted over there, I guess. But then over here, like here's the mantle puncture hole. Maybe it's just more like preventing of the flow from cutting across this way. Like it deflects around it here. It just deflects around. Deflects around at some point over here. But in the middle, maybe it like built up enough pressure to actually erupt for a time as these ones. And then in Siberian traps. And then the current started to flow this way through Central Atlantic Magmatic Province. Because, like, I mean, there's definitely other dates in, like, Australia. Like, it's not so, like, exactly pressure here, then there, then here, then there. Like, there's still a lot of pressure over here. So probably as this pressure builds up over here, it contributes to making this a more optimal place for currents to flow. So like more emissions happen here, although they're silicic, so I'm not sure what the difference is per se in silicic besides its composition, but like in terms of what I'm getting at and why it would be different exactly as undercurrents, possibly some sort of separation process that like literally occurs when current bends and like certain materials enter different flow paths to a point where they emerge as silicic in this instance. I don't know. And over here and over here. There's still so much more. Oh my god, how far are we? Oh my god. Did I even hit play on this? Let's hit play on this. Okay, which would be, okay, let me can go back a little bit. When the pressure is reached, seems like flows build around Australia, leading to or opposite the mantle puncture hole, leading to less laminar flows away from the mantle puncture hole, leading to building pressures in Asia, leading to building pressure in intermediary regions. So it kind of like did Australia, then Asia, and then intermediary regions. And when the pressures reach the region of Australia again around 120 million years in the formation of the Ontong Java Plateau, Nui, Whitsunday, as well as on its opposite side, over here, there's some Kerguelen, Broken Ridge. These ones, I guess, I was talking about over here, as well as northwest Australia, I guess. The Earth had nowhere to put the currents except to break apart fully. So, like, then ocean plateaus start to form. Once the under cross below the present continents, which were the previous single landmass, once its pressure was filled, like its space is the container space under the crust where this current could flow anywhere, it filled. Then it started to form oceanic plateaus at boundaries that were naturally forming in the current. Like the boundary of Western North America is not like shaped this way by just happenstance. It's literally by the current flows that came from Pakistan's mantle puncture hole and flowed in all directions and swept the globe. And initiated the structuring of everything on Earth, including the shapes of the continents, which were one single landmass, so they like didn't have these shapes. But then it, at the boundaries, starts to form these oceanic plateaus, which then I believe Earth had nowhere to put the currents except to break apart fully. So like it created these mounds, but those mounds like helped to space the continents so that they could actually break apart and not just kind of like have a gouge between some segment, but actually break the continents, the landmass of the entire Earth crust into chunks so that then new ocean floor could form. Which is really, like, if you look around, 120, all these oceanic plateaus are before 65 million, besides Seychelles. The only ones are even Seychelles and Sierra Leone, and I guess up here around Iceland, which could be explained as just pinch points, locations of like less expansion having occurred yet. Like this broke apart early, but maybe this didn't happen as early. Looks like the northern Atlantic did happen all after around 100 or around 60 million according to this. Like there's no green. Green goes all the way back to around 60. Yellow is 60. So it looks like this didn't really open until 60 million. So like this opened. And same for over here where Seychelles was like abutting India. So that would be why those were able to form then, as well as like around this stretch where, like I said earlier, that's where they were still conjoined, like in this area. So it's much more likely that oceanic plateaus of a later age would form in those spaces. But really, everywhere else is like approaching 65 million, really, like between uh, the time frame when Baja BC is happening, interestingly, which is like 150. I think all the like nuances of what went on in that region are especially around like 150 to maybe 50 million kind of time frame. So, like, in short, these are spacers that helped contribute to spacing the continents apart while the continents were still conjoined and not able to fully break apart, and then they broke apart and then they stopped forming pretty much. That would be my interpretation. And they became spacers by the crust breaking apart, kind of like Ontong Java, but where this undercurrent flowed upwelled into that space and occupied it and helped contribute to pushing the continents apart until they did, and then the undercurrent like didn't have to flow into those locations anymore, so it could become more laminar in its nature, which then induced the ocean floors as we know them, which are much more like this, just streaks, dude, where they don't have structure in the same way as the continents. Like totally different makeup of the magnetic anomaly maps of the continents, totally different. They're all very unique and different in their own ways, but the ocean floor, besides the Western Pacific, is pretty much all highly similar, at least in appearance. Like there's certainly nuances. Like this is quite interesting. This, like the way this vibrates as well, this is crazy. But generally speaking, they're much more similar. So then I go on to say, which would be why the mean age of oceanic crust is 64.2 million years, and most oceanic crust of the Earth is dated to less than 200 million, because the Earth required to build up pressure first, so much so as to form large igneous provinces to push chunks forming continents apart before it could more readily expand, which is what I just said pretty much. I'm revisiting large igneous provinces because of the Ontong Java Plateau's relevance. Back in March, I made the Reading Lips one. Further pertinent large igneous provinces, Altay Sayan, dated to 400 million in the region of the Siberian Traps, And Yakutsk-Vilyui traps, likely closely tied to the Yakutsk-Vilyui traps based on timing, but also tied to the Siberian traps. And then I point out the East Sulawesi one. Here's a map of some other ones, I believe, based on the quantity of flow. I'm not completely certain what these numbers meant from this website I was looking at. I guess I can just click it. There it is. It's like it's in here though. With all these. Some older ones, but we didn't really look at older ones. Those are relating more to different time of Earth's history, I would go on to say. See my Mercury, the Messenger God video, I guess, if you're interested in kind of what I'm thinking about those kinds of large igneous provinces. More of like a Venus time frame in Earth's history when it's more like Venus. Becoming like Venus. Venus is known to have undergone like a planetary or believed to have undergone like a planetary supervolcano event where the entire planet was like a supervolcano. It's probably much more like how those large igneous provinces before the basically Precambrian large igneous provinces were formed, was a process more of that nature than this exactly, although possibly very similar, probably. It is likely thus that the East Sulawesi is related to currents that flowed in, which I showed this, as well as depositing a large igneous province in the location. And then this link I've been reading is the most comprehensive one list I've come across. Of interest as well is the Benham Rise, which is also called the Philippine Rise, I guess, Benham Bank. Dated to 48 million years, extremely close to the mean age of marginal and back arc basins of the Earth. And I say, is this a coincidence? So I previously was pointing out here the mean age of oceanic crust is 64.2, which really, like, none of these oceanic plateaus are that young. Most of them are older, except for the ones we pointed out already, Seychelles and North Atlantic. But generally speaking, the mean age of these oceanic plateaus is less, or the age of the oceanic plateaus is greater than the mean age of the overall oceanic crust, meaning they all formed prior to like the rapid expansion of the Earth, basically, and contributed to the process of the rapid expansion of the Earth. Okay, so similarly, I was thinking maybe this one related to back arc basins, like 48 million Philippines has the Benham Rise. So this is one that is younger. If we go back here, the only ones younger than the mean age of the oceanic crust are before Deccan traps. So we do have Benham Rise, Silesia, and Yakutat, which is, okay, so that's 56 to 49, which is along North America. I'm trying to find it. Which is occurring over here. Interestingly, over here, where the Philippines... Over here, let me continue, and up here. Where the Philippines... I got pointed out here. We're generally here, so that Benham rise... 48 million. That's very similar in age to Silesia. A little younger. Almost suggestive that whatever formed Benham Rise was first forming Silesia and the Yakutat and all these other, I guess, Crescent and Prometheus. All of these are quite possibly precursors of the Benham Rise, like something that was forming there. I'm a little surprised that they would even interact at that stage in age, because at that point the Earth is expanding pretty good. Like, certainly the crust is still underneath North America and sliding out enough that maybe it's possible that it was still over there, I guess. I'd be surprised if it was, though. Like, we would see. Wouldn't really make sense, I don't think. Like, it might have rode this wave over, kind of thing. Like, separated completely from Western Australia, because it was like this. Just close all these like this. It was over here. Sulawesi was down here. Borneo over here, which is up there. It's possible it kind of lingered and stayed behind. And then detached as like the last point of detachment was maybe the Philippines. And then it detached. And as it detached, current that was like going in here and like interacting with this space, that was then like kind of spraying opposite into Silesia, creating an oceanic plateau that then collided with North America, that went up this way and created regions over here. And then it moved away, but not before creating a little plateau here, and then it was done. Moving along this way. Generally docking connected to Taiwan. Connecting back to Sulawesi. Unclear. That might be a little ridiculous in terms of dating and things. Although that is really interesting. That is at the time of the mean age of back arc marginal basins. Like these things. And it formed at that general time frame. That's pretty crazy. Another highly pertinent relationship of large igneous provinces to undercurrents. The first image here. Oh yeah, right. This really caught my attention. I'm like, wait a minute. I know this stretch, is that the Farrar Large Igneous Province is found in both Antarctica and Tasmania, where undercurrents pass through Antarctica to Australia, as I discuss here. So other currents went through Antarctica. These are coming from, this is just a clip from Earth's undercurrents, coming from under Africa, across under Antarctica, and then up into Tasmania. So, like, I literally go in the path that they draw here, like this. Oops, this one. Like, this little rectangle is really fitting. I mean, it's maybe a little more like through there and across generally. Even the way this is, like, more so on the right side. In here, I guess it's in here. So more so in where I was saying, and then along the boundary of it, which fits pretty well with that current. Suggestive that that current was kind of picking up pressures to a point where it's like erupting, maybe cutting the surface of the crust apart and contributing to opening this gap between adjacent continents and erupting onto the surface or through the surface through like smaller fractures that were adjacent but not exactly at this boundary that then healed in a way. Unclear. The Farrar Karoo Large Igneous Provinces are both dated to around 125 or 182 million. So the Karoo is in like South Africa and across into Antarctica as well. So it's pretty much the same location. Like I say, the current comes through basically the region of the East African Rift, but maybe not yet. Like with enough back pressures from down here to like erupt up here, I guess. And it cuts across through Antarctica, but maybe also more directly here in a way where it erupts here, erupts through the path. Which is also associated, this is really interesting, with the Serra Garral basalts of Central South America, image here, which also, so this, notice we're like southern Brazil, which wouldn't seem related maybe if there's a current flowing this way through here. But I also, in my video Earth's Undercurrents, I say it also goes over here, runs into resistance and goes up and wraps around because it runs into resistance here, so it kind of wraps around. And which is right there, this way. So again, like the same path relates to all of these in a way that's pretty anomalous. Like, what are the odds that this like general current path flows under all three of these locations, which are all associated with one another according to modern interpretation? Like, that's not me saying they're associated with one another. I mean, I guess it was me saying it, but let me see. It's definitely not me saying it, though. Somewhere I heard that. I didn't just freaking claim them to be associated. That might be because I can't read this paper, but I wouldn't have linked it if I had a better link that actually had the paper. I don't know. Oh, maybe it's here. There, this is where it was. That's right, it was from Wikipedia. According to Robert John Pankhurst, the Farrar supergroup is well known as being representative of a Middle Jurassic Gondwana-wide continental flood basalt event, which includes Tasmanian dolerites, the Karoo supergroup, so this is Farrar, Karoo of southern Africa, and the Serra Gerwald basalts of Central America. These continental tholiates are indicative of a large-scale extensional rift system and associated Middle Jurassic magmatic activity linked to the breakup of Gondwana 25 million years later when East Antarctica separated from Africa and the Mozambique Basin opened. Included in the supergroup are the Farrar Kirkpatrick basalts. I don't know what these other ones are, if they're parts of the Karoo maybe, or their own thing. This further links the Chon Ike Formation of southern South America, which curiously has an acidic composition. Acidic composition. So Chon Ike down here. Karoo, Farrar, Chon Ike. This one has an acidic and basic compositions. This is what I was saying in terms of like differentiation of the undercurrent as it flows, dependent on it like bending, especially. Maybe something of that nature. I don't really know exactly why it would be acidic and basic. So I just pointed it out. The paper further attributes the opening of the Weddell Sea to the large igneous provinces. The Weddell Sea opened, according to this paper, due to the large igneous provinces, which is what I was just saying. The whole expansion of the earth was caused by, in terms of like under pressures building and then large igneous provinces building, like mounds that were just so big they just like caused the earth to break apart, caused the Weddell Sea to open. As a result, large igneous provinces further corroborate that the Earth expanded, as well as shedding light onto nuances of the process, based on the sequence and magnitude in which they formed. And then I say another large igneous province is the Mid-Pacific, which I already went into a little bit. And then I linked these video, my Earth's Undercurrents video, and these images from it. I should probably go. I don't know if I really went full circles per se. I certainly went around the whole globe and went into large igneous provinces. Maybe let's go back before we stop here. I kind of just skipped over these ones as well, which is fine for the time being. I also just wanted to make this video because I've been not making any. There's like something I see that I would have, when I was making the first 300 and maybe 50 of them, I would have made a video about, but I just was like, I can't make one yet. What am I? I'm almost like trapped myself by this like weird 360. I did it. But, yeah. So I guess I kind of went around the world full circle. And I think this makes sense of the oceanic plateaus, like straight up. What did you hope to learn about here? Is that the lyrics? Straight up. Oh, it was. Yeah. If I was someone. Wonder what it's like to be a rainmaker, like the Carnian Pluvial episode. I wonder what it's like to know that I made the rain. I'd store it in boxes with little yellow tags on every one. You can come and see them when I'm done. I wonder what it's like to be a super. Okay. It's a pleasure being back. We'll see what happens. I'm glad to get past 360. It's like constipation or something. It's just like it's nice to not be doing it in some ways and just chilling in terms of just like not stressing myself out too much. But then that was starting to stress me out. So, it's I gotta do stuff. And so here I am. All right, peace. I gotta go. Speaking of doing stuff.